It's my turn now. I'm not going to sing, don't worry. That's all right. Right then. So this morning, I think last night as well, the children have been looking at the story of Joseph. And I don't know, often when we think about the life of Joseph or the story of Joseph, often the first thing that comes to mind is his coat, and his technical a dream coat. You know, I think for many people, whether they go to church or not, that's probably the first thing that they associate with Joseph. And there's been many films and plays and musicals done on the life of Joseph because of his coat. Now, this morning I brought a coat with me. Now, it's not as colourful or as jazzy as what Joseph would have been, but it's a coat all the same anyway. So I'll just hang that on there if it will. Now, it's a bit mucky actually. Anyway, not to worry. Now, I think Jacob gave Joseph this coat because God blessed Jacob with a son when he was in his old age, and that was Joseph. And I think Jacob he loved his son Joseph all the more because he was born to him in old age, and that made all his other brothers, they were quite jealous, and they didn't like Joseph because of this, because Joseph was his dad's favourite. And as God gave Jacob a son, Jacob gave this coat to Joseph. This got me thinking about all the things that God gives to us, and the many different things and good gifts that God gives us. Sometimes we take things for granted and often don't appreciate them as we should do. It's important to remember that we live in a part of the world where we've got so much, and that we're compared to so many, and we've got many good gifts that God has given us. So I've got a few little things in here. Now I could do with some helpers, and I've got a few here, so that's all right. So I'll give you one of them each. There we go. So, got some pegs. I've read Mum's peg box this morning. So, right. So you want to come up, and if you come up and peg these onto this coat, and we can all see what we've got. That's it. So you peg it on there somewhere if you can. That's it. Your peg. Evelyn. So what have we got? We've got family. We're very thankful for the families that we've got. And what's that one? School. Maybe not always too thankful for school, but we have to go and it does us good, I think, anyway. But anyway, if I hold it, that's it. Good lad. There we're struggling with that one. We don't like school, do we? There we go. Good lad. And what's that one? Wrong way around. And friends, it's good to have friends as well. There you go, Lewis. That's it, you. Lad. You turn that one round. That's it, you peg it on there. Oop. Good lad. And we've got the homes that we come from too. It's good that we have somewhere to live and somewhere to sleep at night. Good lad. All the way around, that's good. Peg. James. That's it. We've got lots of food to eat and things to drink as well. That's it, Evelyn, you stick that on somewhere. And we're thankful for our health and our strength too, and we've got people to look after us when we're not well in the hospital, and for animals and for our pets and on the farms too. And for clothes to wear to keep us warm. And I have one late edition. Mine is Gressingham Bridge this morning. I've missed it a lot over these last 6 months or so, but I'll peg that one on too, just as we do. It cut my journey down somewhat this morning, so that was good. So, but most of all, we're thankful that God gave us Jesus, and I'll peg that one down there. And that's why we've got the cross. In all these things that God gives to us, they're all very good gifts and all very important to us, and there are all many blessings that God shares with us, but most importantly that that God, He sent Jesus to us, and that's why we have the cross. And Jesus, He died on that cross to take away the punishment which we all deserve, and for all the wrong things and the sin that each of us have done in our lives. And we've just had Easter time recently over the last month or so, and we remembered then when Jesus died on that first Good Friday, and he rose again on the third day. And we can all rest on that promise so that we can spend eternity with Him if we ask forgiveness for what we've done and put our trust in Him for the rest of our lives and live our lives for Him. Joseph's story is one how God, He works to overcome evil, to bring about His plan. After all the terrible things and the times which Joseph had to go through and the different things that he had to experience, he was still able to see God's hand at work. Even when he told his brothers who he was, he tells them that they're not to be troubled or to be angry with themselves for what they've done, but it was God that sent him there. And Joseph, he goes on to forgive his brothers, and it says in chapter 50 of Genesis that you intended to harm me, but God, He intended it for good. And I think if I had a text for this morning, that would be it, that it would be that you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. Probably in our own lives we can find ourselves in many difficult and troubling circumstances. Some we might, bring about by ourselves, and others just through the nature of life can come upon us. And like Joseph, these times can be seen to be unjust, and maybe we don't see why it's fair or why things have happened. But looking at Joseph's life and from his account, you can see that by remaining faithful and just accepting that God is ultimately in charge of his life, and despite the path that sometimes that we have to take or that comes our way, we can be confident in God, and that He'll reward us and reward our faithfulness in the fullness of His time. We know life can be difficult at times, and it can be really hard, in fact, and maybe we don't always know or don't always understand why it needs to be that way. And but God's way and His plan is so much bigger than our own, and more important than any we may have. Nothing will ultimately stop what He wants to do in our lives. I think if I look back in my own life, I know that the difficult times and when it maybe hasn't been as easy, that God, He uses those times for His glory. And even though we might not see it always in that moment, He uses sometimes the pain and the hurt in life just to shape and to mould us into the people that He wants us to be. And like Joseph, people that He can use for His glory. And although life, as we say, can be difficult, we must remember that God will always love us, and that He's always seeking our best interests, that He'll always be with us, and that He always still wants to use us too. And ultimately He will deliver us, but that's in His time and not our own. As we've seen this morning, God has given and continues to give us so much, and that includes Jesus and what He went through for us on the cross. And God's ultimate plan was to overcome evil through Jesus, and Jesus was obedient to His Father and obedient to death on the cross to save us all from the wrong that we'd done. Just looking through the life of Joseph, God's plan was to use him to overcome evil, and Joseph was obedient and yielded himself to God throughout his entire life. And although different maybe, we can see attributes of Joseph paralleling that of Jesus. Joseph's life was one of character and courage and conviction and commitment to God. Whether he was locked away in that dark pit or whether ruling from his throne, the man yielded himself to the hand of God. And although, as we said, his life wasn't straightforward, Joseph, he had a divine purpose. And God had a purpose for his life, and in the same way God has a purpose for you and I and for each of us as we go about our lives. We must remember that whatever situation or circumstance that we can find ourselves in today, that we just need to keep focused on Him and keeping our eyes fixed on Him. Time after time I have to keep telling myself I've got to just keep looking upwards and keep looking up to Him. It's all too easy sometimes just to get caught up in the everyday of life and all that we're going through and that we're dealing with in that moment, and we can easily lose sight of God in it all and the plan which He has for us. God, He wants to use us in many different ways, but we must be obedient and focused on Him to allow us to complete his purpose through us. Romans 8:28 reminds us that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. As we said before, you intended to harm me, but God, he intended it for good. So that's what I just wanted to leave you with this morning, that in all that we go through as we look at the life of Joseph and different things and all that he had to experience, that in all things, although we can't always see it, God, he intends them for good. And we just have to keep following and trusting and holding on to him through all that we do and all that we seek to do. And he will continue to use us, and he will bless us in the work that he has set out for us. Shall we just pray? We sing again. Heavenly Father, I do thank you for the life of Joseph and for what we can learn from him, Lord. I thank you that through all that he went through, that he continued to serve and to honour you, and he was obedient to you, and he just lived his life focused on you, Lord. And I pray that in all that we seek to do, Lord, whether on our own or as part of a church or whatever, Lord, that we will just do it with you in our sights, Lord, and that you will just keep hold of us and use us. And we know that you have a plan and a purpose for each of us, Lord. And I do thank you for the children here this morning, Lord, and for what they've brought to us, Lord. And I pray you'll continue to have your hand over them, Lord, and you'll bring them on to be real followers of you, and that they'll go on and serve you in their lives in all that you call them to do, Lord. So I just ask these things in your name. Amen. Amen. We're just going to close now as we sing